Use the household ledger, darling.
I have to go to the bank. I need to see the account files.
I can't show you those files without Arthur's consent.
It is my home, too. Legally, no, dear.
Part 1. The Paper Cage. The Hook. The morning light in Levittown didn't just shine, it exposed. It highlighted the faint layer of dust on the mahogany sideboard and the tiny, frantic tremor in Evelyn Vance's hands as she polished the silver. In 1956, perfection wasn't a choice for a woman like Evelyn. It was a survival strategy. If the house was spotless and the pot roast was timed to the second, perhaps the hollow ache in her chest would finally go away. Arthur had left for the city at 7, smelling of peppermint and expensive wool. He had kissed her cheek, a brief, distracted press of lips, and reminded her to call the plumber about the leak in the upstairs bathroom. "Use the household ledger, darling," he'd said, patting his briefcase. "Keep the receipts." Evelyn waited until the sound of his Cadillac faded into the distance. She hated that ledger. It was a record of her dependence. Every gallon of milk, every pair of stockings for the children, every cent she spent had to be justified to him at the end of the month. She didn't own the house. She didn't own the car. Technically, she didn't even own the dress she was wearing. She went to the small desk in the den to find the plumber's number. As she rummaged through the drawer for a pen, her hand struck a false bottom in the back. A heavy, cream-colored envelope slid out. It wasn't the ledger. She opened it, expecting old tax returns. Instead, she found a second mortgage notice. Her heart skipped a beat. They had paid off the house 2 years ago. Arthur had thrown a party to celebrate. But the document in her hand, dated only 3 months prior, told a different story. Arthur had taken out a massive loan against their home. As she scanned the lines, her eyes blurred. There were gambling debts mentioned in a handwritten note clipped to the back, staggering amounts lost at a private club in Manhattan. Arthur, the stoic provider, the man who lectured her on the price of butter, had risked their children's roof on a sequence of cards. And the most crushing realization? Her signature wasn't required. Under the laws of the state, his signature was the only one that mattered. She was a ghost in her own home. Evelyn sat on the floor of the den, the expensive floral wallpaper suddenly feeling like the bars of a cell. She looked at her reflection in the glass of a family photo. She saw a woman who had spent 10 years building a life that didn't belong to her. "I have to go to the bank," she whispered. She dressed with trembling precision, the navy suit, the white gloves, the hat. She looked like the perfect wife. But as she walked toward the bus stop, the echo of her own footsteps on the pavement sounded like a countdown. At the First National Bank, the air was thick with the scent of cigar smoke and cold marble. She waited 20 minutes before the manager, a man with a thin mustache and a condescending smile, saw her. "Mrs. Vance, a pleasure. How is Arthur?" "Arthur is well," Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the roar in her ears. "I'm here because I noticed a discrepancy in our home equity. I'd like to see the records for our joint savings." The manager chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. "Now, Evelyn, you know how it is. I can't show you those files without Arthur's written consent. It's for your protection, really. We wouldn't want you worrying your head over complicated figures." "It is my home, too," she said, her grip tightening on her handbag. "Legally? No, dear. It's Arthur's. You are his beneficiary. If you need a little extra for the groceries this week, I'm sure he'll provide it. Why don't you go home and put on some music? You look a bit peaked." Evelyn walked out of the bank into the midday sun. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a lady. She felt like a prisoner who had just realized the guards were her friends, her neighbors, and her husband. She stood on the corner of 5th and Main, the bustling crowd of New York moving around her. She had no money of her own, no legal standing, no voice in the eyes of the law. But as she touched the heavy envelope hidden in her coat, the fear began to calcify into a cold, hard anger. Arthur thought he had married a subject. He didn't realize he had married a witness. Part 2. The Price of Permission. Rising Action. The house felt different now. The walls of the Levittown Colonial, once the pride of Evelyn's heart, felt like they were closing in, inch by suffocating inch. Every time she looked at the crown molding or the expensive floral wallpaper, she didn't see a home. She saw the debt Arthur had piled onto their lives without a single word of consultation. Evelyn spent the night staring at the ceiling, the second mortgage notice hidden under her mattress like a jagged blade. By morning, the shock had transformed into a cold, calculating desperation. She needed money. Not the household allowance Arthur doled out like a reward for a well-behaved child, but her own currency. When Arthur left for the city, his kiss felt like a transaction. "Don't forget the Millers are coming for bridge on Friday, Evie," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. "Make sure the bar is stocked." "Of course, Arthur," she replied, her voice a perfect mask of suburban serenity. The moment his car turned the corner, Evelyn was at the kitchen table with a newspaper. She bypassed the recipes and the fashion tips, her eyes scanning the "Help Wanted" columns. She was a college graduate. She had studied English literature before Arthur had swept her off her feet in a whirlwind of jazz clubs and promises. Surely she could find a secretarial position. By noon, she was in Midtown Manhattan, standing before a drab gray building that housed a law firm. She had pinned her hair back and wore her most professional suit. The interview was brief. The office manager, a woman who looked like she hadn't smiled since the Great Depression, looked over Evelyn's application. "You have the skills, Mrs. Vance. Your typing speed is excellent." A spark of hope ignited in Evelyn's chest. "When can I start?" The woman sighed, pushing a form across the desk. "As soon as your husband signs this, we require spousal consent for all married women employees. It's company policy, and frankly, the law of the house." The spark died. "My husband, he doesn't know I'm here. Is there no other way?" "Mrs. Vance," the woman said, her voice softening for a fleeting second, "if Arthur Vance found out we hired you without his say-so, he could sue us for interference with his domestic rights. Go home. Talk to him. If he's a good man, he'll let you work a few hours a week for pin money." Evelyn walked out into the cold New York wind, her white-gloved hands trembling. Pin money. As if her independence was a hobby, a little game to keep her occupied between laundry loads. She spent the afternoon walking through the city, realizing the true architecture of her prison. To the world, she was Mrs. Arthur Vance. Without him, she had no credit, no standing, and no right to earn a living. She walked past a department store window and saw a reflection of a woman who looked polished and perfect, yet she knew that woman didn't own the shoes she stood in. When she returned home, she stopped at the local grocery store. Usually, she would hand the change back to Arthur at the end of the week, down to the last penny. Not today. "That will be $4.62, Mrs. Vance," the clerk said. Evelyn handed him a $5 bill. When he placed the 38 cents in her palm, she didn't put it in her coin purse. She slid it into the silk lining of her coat, where a small tear in the pocket allowed the coins to fall deep into the hem. The weight of the coins against her leg felt heavier than gold. It was the first time in 10 years she possessed something Arthur didn't know about. That evening, dinner was a performance of silence. Arthur talked about the office, about a new account for a cigarette company. He looked at her, his eyes narrowed slightly. "You seem quiet tonight, Evelyn. Everything all right with the house?" "Just tired, Arthur. The children were a handful today," she lied, the words tasting like ash. "Well, rest up. I need you at your best for Friday. Appearance is everything in this business." As she washed the dishes, Evelyn looked out the window at the identical houses lining the street. How many other women were hiding coins in their hems? How many were staring at their husbands across the dinner table, realizing they were married to a stranger who owned their very existence? She wasn't just an echo anymore. She was a secret, growing in the dark. Part 3. The Secret in the Hem. The conflict begins. The weight in the hem of Evelyn's coat grew with every trip to the market. 30 cents from the butcher, 15 cents from the baker. It was a slow, agonizing accumulation of freedom, brick by tiny brick. In the quiet hours of the afternoon, while the children were at school, she would sit in the nursery and feel the fabric, confirming that the hard, metallic lumps were still there. They were her only reality in a world built on porcelain lies. By Wednesday, the tension in the Vance household was vibrating like a piano wire stretched to its breaking point. Arthur was erratic. He would return home late, his breath smelling of gin and cheap perfume, his eyes bloodshot and restless. He no longer looked at Evelyn, he looked through her, as if she were just another piece of furniture he had already paid for. "I need $50 from the savings, Evelyn," he said over breakfast, his voice flat. "An investment opportunity in the city, fast turnaround." Evelyn didn't blink. She knew there was no investment. There was only the green felt of a poker table and the desperate hope of a man drowning in his own hubris. "Of course, Arthur. I'll go to the bank this morning." "Good. Don't be late. I have a client meeting at the club." After he left, Evelyn didn't go to the bank. Instead, she went to the backyard to hang the laundry, her mind racing. She saw Marianne across the fence, shaking out a set of white sheets. Marianne, whose husband was a senior partner at Arthur's firm. Marianne, who always had a bruise on her wrist that she blamed on clumsiness with the vacuum. Evelyn approached the fence. "Beautiful day for it, Marianne." The other woman started, nearly dropping a clothespin. Her eyes were darting, nervous. "Oh, yes, Evelyn, very bright." "Marianne," Evelyn whispered, leaning closer, her voice barely audible over the wind. "I found a notice. A second mortgage. Arthur he's losing everything." Marianne froze. She didn't look at Evelyn. She looked at her own hands, raw and red from the lye soap. "My Harold. He's been talking. They're worried at the office, Evelyn. There's talk of an audit. They think Arthur has been borrowing from the client accounts." Evelyn felt the ground tilt. It wasn't just gambling. It was embezzlement. Arthur wasn't just risking their home. He was risking his soul and his freedom. "Why didn't you tell me?" Evelyn asked, a sudden surge of anger rising in her throat. "And say what?" Marianne finally looked at her, and Evelyn saw a hollow, ancient exhaustion in her eyes. "Where would we go? I have no money, Evelyn. No car in my name, no job skills. If Harold goes down, I go down with him. We are just the ornaments on a sinking ship." Evelyn reached over the fence and took Marianne's hand. The contact was electric, a silent pact between two prisoners. "I'm saving, cents at a time. It's not much, but it's mine." Marianne's eyes widened. "If they find it, Evelyn, they'll call it theft." "A wife stealing from her husband's estate." "Let them," Evelyn said, her voice turning to flint. "It's my labor that keeps this house standing. It's my life he's spending." That afternoon, while cleaning Arthur's study, Evelyn found a small velvet box tucked behind his collection of law books. Her heart leaped. Was this an apology? A gesture of remorse? She opened it. Inside sat a shimmering diamond pendant, cold and brilliant. It was beautiful. It was also completely new, and she knew with a devastating certainty that it wasn't for her. She had checked the household ledger. There was a receipt from Tiffany & Company for a Miss Sandra Miller. Sandra Miller, the wife of Arthur's biggest client. The betrayal wasn't a sharp pain. It was a dull, heavy realization. Arthur hadn't just mortgaged the house. He had mortgaged their entire history for a woman who represented the life he thought he deserved. Evelyn closed the box and put it back exactly where she found it. She didn't cry. She went to the kitchen, took the heavy sewing scissors from the drawer, and sat on the floor. She began to rip the lining of her best Sunday coat. One by one, the coins fell out, clinking against the linoleum. Nickels, dimes, quarters. It wasn't enough to run. But it was enough to buy a bus ticket to her sister's house in Vermont. It was enough to buy a phone call to a lawyer she knew from college. As the sun began to set, casting long, distorted shadows across the perfect kitchen, Evelyn Vance stood up. She looked at the coins, then at the house that was no longer hers. The echo of the girl who believed in fairy tales was dead. The woman who remained was ready to burn the script. Part 4. The Threat of Silence. The conflict peaks. The atmosphere in the house had shifted from a simmer to a predatory chill. Arthur no longer moved with his usual swagger. He moved with a sharp, jagged edge, his eyes scanning the rooms for any sign of disorder or defiance. He had noticed the change in Evelyn. It wasn't anything she had said. It was the way she didn't flinch when he slammed his briefcase down, and the way she stared at him with eyes that seemed to be weighing his soul and finding it wanting. On Thursday evening, the mask finally cracked. Arthur came home earlier than usual, his face a mask of gray fury. He didn't greet her. He went straight to the kitchen where Evelyn was preparing the children's dinner. He held up a small, crumpled slip of paper, a receipt from a florist she had visited to buy seeds for a secret garden in the backyard. "What is this, Evelyn?" His voice was a low, vibrating growl. "Seeds, Arthur, for the garden." "You used the emergency fund." He stepped closer, his shadow engulfing her against the refrigerator. "You took money that wasn't yours to take. And I heard from Harold. He saw you whispering at the fence with Mary Ann. What are you plotting, Evelyn? What lies are you spreading about this family?" "I'm not spreading lies, Arthur. I'm telling the truth. I know about the mortgage. I know about the loans from your clients. And I know about the pendant for Sandra Miller." The slap wasn't loud, but it was enough to send Evelyn staggering back against the counter. The sting on her cheek was nothing compared to the sudden, icy clarity in her mind. Arthur didn't apologize. He leaned in, his breath hot against her ear. "You think you have leverage? You think you can walk out of here? Look at yourself, Evelyn. You're a nervous wreck. You've been imagining things for months. I've already spoken to Dr. Aris. We've discussed your instability, your delusions about my finances." Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. In 1956, a husband's word was often enough to commit a wife to a sanitarium for exhaustion or hysteria. "You wouldn't," she whispered. "I will do whatever is necessary to protect my reputation and my children," Arthur said, his eyes cold as flint. "If you breathe a word of this to anyone, if you try to take those children, I will have you institutionalized before the sun sets. I'll tell the court you're a danger to them. And who will they believe? The successful executive or the housewife who can't even keep her hands from shaking?" He grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. "You will be the perfect wife on Friday night. You will smile at the Millers. You will wear the dress I bought you. And on Monday, we are going to see Dr. Aris to adjust your treatment. Do you understand me?" Evelyn didn't move. She felt like a bird staring at the barrel of a gun. He had everything: the law, the medicine, the money, and the children. She was a ghost in a floral print dress. "I understand," she said, her voice a hollow echo. "Good. Now clean this mess up. You look like a fright." Arthur walked out, leaving her in the darkening kitchen. Evelyn stood still for a long time, the side of her face throbbing. She looked at the sewing scissors still sitting on the counter from the night before. She thought about the coins hidden in the hem of her coat, a few dollars, a pittance against his empire. But then she remembered the pendant. She remembered the audit Mary Ann had mentioned. Arthur was powerful, but he was also desperate. He was a man built on a foundation of stolen sand. She realized then that she couldn't just run. If she ran, she would lose her children forever. She had to do something more dangerous. She had to stay. She had to play the part of the broken, compliant wife one last time, while she gathered the only currency that mattered more than money in Arthur's world: evidence. She reached into her pocket and felt the cold weight of a single dime. It was the echo of a rebellion that was no longer silent. She wasn't just a subject anymore, she was a saboteur. Part 5. The Masquerade. The Turning Point. The house on Friday evening was a masterpiece of suburban deception. The scent of roasting lamb mingled with the sharp, clean aroma of gin and vermouth. Evelyn moved through the living room like a ghost in a Dior New Look silhouette, her emerald silk dress rustling with every measured step. She had spent an hour at the vanity, meticulously blending heavy cream foundation over the faint, yellowish bruise on her cheek until it was invisible under the soft glow of the lamps. "You look breathtaking, Evelyn," Arthur whispered as he passed her a martini glass. His eyes were hard, scanning her face for any hint of the rebellion from the day before. Finding none, his expression softened into a smug, possessive satisfaction. "See, this is the woman I married. Keep this up and we'll forget all about that unpleasantness." Evelyn offered a thin, practiced smile. "Of course, Arthur. I only want what's best for us." When the Millers arrived, the theater began. Sandra Miller draped her mink stole over the chair, her neck bare of the diamond pendant Evelyn knew was hidden upstairs. Arthur was the perfect host, charming, expansive, and utterly confident. He spoke of the agency's growth, of Project Serenity being the cornerstone of a new era in advertising. Evelyn watched him, marveling at how easily he lied, how comfortably he wore his stolen life. "Arthur tells me you've been feeling a bit under the weather lately, Evelyn," Sandra said, leaning in with a look of practiced concern. "The nerves can be so taxing this time of year." "I'm feeling much better now, Sandra," Evelyn replied, her voice steady. "The air is finally clearing." As the dinner progressed into the second course, Evelyn knew her window of opportunity was shrinking. Arthur was deep into a story about a merger, the men laughing loudly over their scotch. This was the moment. "Excuse me for a moment," Evelyn said, rising gracefully. "I believe I left the dessert wine in the cellar." She didn't go to the cellar. She moved silently through the darkened hallway toward Arthur's study. Every floorboard felt like a trap door, every shadow a witness. She reached the door and turned the brass knob. It was locked. Evelyn didn't panic. She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out the small, jagged piece of wire she had salvaged from the children's toy box earlier that day. Her hands, once prone to tremors, were now as steady as a surgeon's. She had practiced this for hours in the solitude of the laundry room. Click. The door swung open. The room smelled of old paper and the expensive cigars Arthur kept for his important guests. She crossed the room to the heavy mahogany desk, her heart thumping a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She didn't look for the mortgage notice. She already knew where that led. She looked for the ledger Vance and Associates shouldn't have known existed. She found it tucked inside a hollowed-out volume of Black's Law Dictionary. It was a nightmare of numbers. Rows of figures showed thousands of dollars moved from the Miller account into Arthur's personal gambling fund. It was all there. The dates, the amounts, the fraudulent signatures. It was more than a mistake. It was a career-ending, life-shattering crime. As she reached for her camera, the small Kodak she had hidden under her shawl, a floorboard creaked in the hallway. Evelyn froze. The laughter from the dining room seemed 1,000 miles away. The footsteps were heavy, deliberate. They stopped right outside the study door. "Evelyn?" Arthur's voice was low, laced with a sudden, sharp suspicion. "Are you in there?" She looked at the ledger, then at the open window. To stay was to be caught. To run was to leave her children. She shoved the ledger back into the book and stood in the center of the room, the shadows swallowing her green dress. The door began to turn. Part 6. The Steel Behind the Silk. The climax of the evening. The brass knob turned with agonizing slowness. Evelyn had only 3 seconds. She didn't hide. Instead, she grabbed a heavy crystal decanter of scotch from the side table and tilted it, letting a generous splash soak into the front of her emerald silk dress. By the time the door swung open, she was leaning against the mahogany desk, her eyes unfocused, a glass held loosely in her hand. Arthur stepped into the room, his face contorted in a mask of silent, murderous rage. He looked at the open law book on the desk, then at the wet stain on her dress, and finally at her face. "What are you doing in here?" he hissed, his voice a jagged blade of whisper. "The Millers are waiting. I told you to stay in the kitchen." Evelyn let out a soft, hollow laugh that sounded brittle even to her own ears. I couldn't breathe, Arthur. The smiles, the lies about Project Serenity, it's all so heavy." She gestured vaguely with the glass. "I just wanted a drink that wasn't watered down by your domestic stability." Arthur crossed the room in 2 strides, grabbing her wrist so hard the glass nearly shattered. He looked at the law book. The hollowed-out center was visible, but in the dim light and his own mounting panic, he didn't see that the ledger had been disturbed. He only saw a wife who appeared to be unraveling, the very hysteria he had been planning to use against her. "You're drunk," he spat, though his eyes darted toward the hallway to ensure the Millers hadn't heard. "You finally lost your mind. I should call Dr. Eris right now." "Go ahead," Evelyn whispered, leaning closer until she could smell the expensive tobacco on his breath. "Call him. Let him see the bruises you hide under my powder. Let the Millers see how the great Arthur Vance handles his perfect wife. I'm sure Sandra would love to know where that diamond pendant really came from." Arthur froze. For the first time, he didn't look angry. He looked terrified. The power dynamic in the room shifted, the air thick with the realization that his secrets were no longer locked in his head. "Get out," he said, his voice trembling with a different kind of intensity. "Go to the kitchen. Clean yourself up. Tell them you felt faint. If you say one more word, one more syllable, I will lock you in that room upstairs and you will never see the children again. Do you understand me?" "Perfectly," Evelyn said. She pulled her arm free, her skin already blossoming with a dark red mark. She walked past him, her head held high, the emerald silk rustling like a warning. She returned to the dining room, the perfect hostess once more. She apologized for her moment of weakness, blaming the heat of the oven. She poured more wine. She laughed at Mr. Miller's jokes. She was a ghost, performing a ritual, her mind already miles away. Inside her mind, she wasn't thinking about the scotch or the slap. She was thinking about the ledger. She hadn't been able to photograph it, but she had seen the account numbers. She had seen the names. She had the echo of the truth. And tomorrow, while Arthur slept off the gin, she would turn that echo into a roar. As the Millers finally left, Arthur didn't even look at her. He went straight to the study and locked the door from the inside. Evelyn stood in the dark foyer, listening to the silence of the house. The children were asleep. The silver was dirty. The house was mortgaged to a lie. But for the first time in 10 years, Evelyn Vance felt like she wasn't a subject of an experiment. She was the one holding the magnifying glass. Monday morning was only 48 hours away, and Monday morning was when the silent wife would finally speak. Part 7. The Quiet Sabotage. Rising Action. Saturday was a suffocating shroud of domesticity. Arthur didn't go to the office. He stayed in the house, a dark, prowling presence that hovered in the doorways while Evelyn moved through her chores. He had unplugged the telephone in the hallway, tucking the cord into his pocket with a thin, cruel smile. "You need rest, Evelyn," he had said, his voice dripping with false concern. "No distractions. Dr. Eris will be here first thing Monday morning to help you find your peace again." He thought he had cut her off. He thought a house without a phone and a woman without a car was a woman without a voice. He didn't understand that an echo doesn't need a wire to travel. Evelyn spent the morning in the kitchen, her movements fluid and practiced. She baked a peach cobbler, the sweet, cloying scent filling the house, masking the bitter smell of her own fear. As she worked, she watched the milkman through the window. Mr. Henderson was a creature of habit. Every Saturday at 10:15 a.m., he left 3 bottles of cream and took the empty glass. Arthur was in the den, his back to the window, nursing a drink and staring at the locked ledger he had moved to his personal safe. He was confident. He was the king of his castle, and the castle was under siege by his own design. Evelyn took a small piece of parchment paper, the kind she used for lining cake tins, and a charcoal pencil from the children's craft box. In small, cramped letters, she wrote, "Vance and Associates. Audit the Sandra Miller account. Check the hidden ledger in the Black's Law volume. My life depends on it. Call the police." She didn't sign her name. She didn't have to. She folded the paper into a tiny square and slipped it into the bottom of an empty milk bottle. She covered it with a small amount of leftover cream to hide the white slip of paper against the white glass. "Arthur?" she called out, her voice sweet and compliant. "I'm putting the empties out. Is there anything else you need from the market? I could ask Mr. Henderson to bring extra butter." Arthur looked up from his glass, his eyes narrowed. He looked at her, the apron, the flower on her cheek, the submissive tilt of her head. He saw exactly what he wanted to see, a broken woman trying to please her master. "Just the milk, Evelyn, and stay away from the fence." "I don't want you bothering Marianne with your fantasies again." "Of course, dear." She stepped onto the porch. The air was cool and crisp, tasting of freedom she couldn't yet touch. Mr. Henderson was already at the gate. He was an old man, one who remembered Evelyn's father, a man who still tipped his hat to a lady. As she handed him the bottles, her fingers brushed his. "The cream bottle, Mr. Henderson," she whispered, her heart hammering so hard she feared it would burst through her ribs. "Check the bottom before you wash it, please, for my father's sake." Henderson paused, his weathered face unreadable. He looked at the house, then at the bruised skin around Evelyn's wrist that her sleeve couldn't quite hide. He didn't nod. He didn't speak. He simply took the bottles, placed them in his wire rack, and tipped his hat. "Good day to you, Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice steady as a rock. Evelyn returned to the kitchen, her knees shaking so violently she had to lean against the sink. She had thrown her message into the bottle and sent it out to sea. Now, all she could do was wait for the tide to turn. The rest of Saturday passed in a blur of terrifying normalcy. They ate dinner, they bathed the children. Arthur read the paper. It was the perfect American life, a Technicolor dream painted over a rotting corpse. That night, as Evelyn lay in bed beside the man who intended to erase her from existence in less than 36 hours, she didn't pray for mercy. She listened to the wind rattling the window pane and thought about the milk bottle. She thought about the laws that said she was nothing and the echo of the truth that said she was everything. Monday was coming, but for the first time, Evelyn Vance wasn't afraid of the dawn. She was the dawn. Part 8. The Accelerated Sentence, the Final Escalation. Sunday morning didn't bring the peace of the Sabbath. It brought a cold, suffocating dread. The house was too quiet. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway sounded like a hammer striking an anvil. Arthur was no longer drinking. He was focused, his movements sharp and surgical. He spent the morning pacing the perimeter of the living room, looking out the windows every few minutes as if expecting an invasion. "You're very calm today, Evelyn," he said, stopping behind her as she folded the Sunday linens. "Too calm. It's the silence of a fever before it breaks." "I'm just doing what you asked, Arthur. I'm resting," she replied, her voice a flat, dead monotone. "You're lying," he hissed, grabbing her wrist and twisting it until she gasped. "You think you've outsmarted me. You think that little display with the milkman went unnoticed? I saw the way he looked at the house. I saw the way you lingered at the gate." Evelyn's heart froze. She hadn't realized he was watching that closely. "I was just being polite, Arthur. He's an old man." "He's a witness," Arthur spat. He threw her arm back. "I'm not waiting until tomorrow. I called Eris from Miller's house while I was checking the mail. He'll be here by 6 tonight. We're going to get you the help you need before you do something we all regret." Evelyn looked at the clock. It was only 2 in the afternoon. 4 hours. She had 4 hours before a black sedan pulled into the driveway and 2 men in white coats took her away from her children, likely forever. In 1956, once a woman entered those gates under a husband's signature, she ceased to exist. She went to the children's room. They were playing with wooden blocks on the rug, oblivious to the fact that their world was about to be decapitated. She knelt and hugged them, breathing in the scent of baby powder and laundry soap, memorizing the weight of them in her arms. "Mommy, why are you crying?" her eldest, David, asked, looking up with wide, innocent eyes. "I'm just so happy to have you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Listen to me, David. If Mommy has to go away for a little while tonight, I want you to take care of your sister. And remember what I told you, the truth is the most important thing, always." By 5 o'clock, the shadows in the backyard were long and distorted, like reaching fingers. Arthur was waiting in the foyer, his coat on, his hat sitting on the table. He looked like a man waiting for a flight, not a man about to betray his wife. "Is that a car?" Arthur muttered, stepping to the window. Evelyn stood in the kitchen doorway, her hand gripping the edge of the Formica counter. She looked at the sewing scissors she had kept hidden in the drawer. If the police didn't come, if Henderson hadn't understood, she wouldn't go quietly. She would not let them take her without a scream that would shatter every window in Levittown. A car did turn the corner, but it wasn't the sleek, professional sedan of Dr. Eris. It was a battered, dusty Ford, and behind it, another car, a black and white cruiser with its lights off but moving with a terrifying, silent speed. Arthur's face went pale. "What is this? Why is the police here?" Evelyn felt a surge of adrenaline so powerful it made her vision blur. "Maybe they're here for the audit, Arthur," she said, her voice finally losing its mask, becoming the roar of the echo she had carried for so long. "Maybe they found the ledger." Arthur turned on her, his hand raised, but the front door didn't wait for him to open it. There was a heavy, rhythmic pounding. "Police, open up! We have a warrant for the arrest of Arthur Vance and a welfare check for Evelyn Vance." The echo had reached the shore. Part 9. The walls come down. The resolution begins. The pounding on the door was the most beautiful sound Evelyn had ever heard. It was the sound of the outside world finally breaking into her domestic prison. Arthur, however, looked like a cornered animal. The cool, calculated executive was gone, replaced by a man whose eyes were wide with a frantic, sweating terror. "You did this," he hissed, lunging toward her. He grabbed her by the shoulders, shaking her with a violence that made her teeth rattle. "You stupid, ungrateful girl. You've destroyed everything. The house, the children, my name. It's all gone because you couldn't stay in your place." "Your name was built on a lie, Arthur," Evelyn spat, her voice cold and sharp as a razor. "I didn't destroy it. You spent it. You gambled it away on cards and Sandra Miller." The front door splintered as the police forced the lock. "Police, stay where you are." Arthur didn't listen. In a final, desperate act of cowardice, he dragged Evelyn toward the study, his arm locked around her throat. He reached for the heavy brass letter opener on the hall table, his knuckles white. He was a man who had spent his life winning, and he didn't know how to lose without taking someone with him. "Stay back!" Arthur screamed at the two officers rushing into the foyer. "She's unstable. She's been threatening me. I'm trying to restrain her for her own safety." The officers didn't hesitate. One of them, a younger man with steady eyes, kept his revolver trained on Arthur's chest. The other was the bank manager's assistant, the one who had seen Evelyn's desperation earlier in the week and had secretly contacted the authorities after the milkman, Mr. Henderson, arrived at the station with a damp piece of parchment paper. "Drop it, Vance," the officer commanded. "We have the ledger. We found your Project Serenity files in the office audit this afternoon. It's over." Arthur's grip on Evelyn's throat tightened for a second, then went limp. The weight of reality finally crushed him. The letter opener clattered to the floor. He let out a sound, not a cry but a whimpering, pathetic moan, as the officers moved in to handcuff him. Evelyn fell against the wall, gasping for air. She watched as they led him away, his head bowed, his tailored suit suddenly looking like a cheap costume. He wasn't a titan. He wasn't a king. He was just a man who had forgotten that a house is only as strong as the truth it holds. The younger officer approached Evelyn, his expression softening. "Mrs. Vance, are you all right? We have a car outside for you and the children. Mr. Henderson is with them now." Evelyn looked at the officer, then at the shattered front door. She looked at the hallway where she had spent 10 years polishing the floors in silence. "I'm fine," she said, and for the first time the words weren't a lie. "I've never been better." She went to the nursery. Mr. Henderson was sitting on the floor with David and the baby, showing them his pocket watch. He looked up at Evelyn and gave a slow, solemn nod. He had understood the echo. As she walked out of the house for the last time, Evelyn didn't look back at the floral wallpaper or the pristine lawn. She looked at the horizon. The sun was setting over Levittown, casting long, golden shadows across the identical houses. She knew the road ahead would be brutal. She had no money, the law was still biased against her, and the stigma of a failed marriage would follow her like a shadow. But as she stepped into the cool evening air, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she was carrying. The silent contract was broken. The echo had become a voice, and the voice was hers. Part 10. The Resonance. The Resolution. The winter in Vermont was a different kind of cold than the artificial chill of a Levittown air conditioner. It was honest. It bit at Evelyn's cheeks as she walked home from the town library, the weight of a heavy wool coat, one without coins hidden in the hem, keeping her grounded. She no longer wore pearls. She wore a simple scarf and sensible boots, and for the first time in a decade, she didn't care if her hair survived the wind. Her new life was small. It consisted of a 2-room apartment, a typewriter that hummed with the rhythm of her own thoughts, and the quiet breathing of her children as they slept in the room next to hers. It was difficult. Every penny was a struggle, and the local shops still whispered when she passed. The divorced woman from the city was a scandalous novelty. But the whispers didn't hurt. They were just noise, easily drowned out by the sound of her own voice. One Tuesday, a thick envelope arrived. It bore the return address of the state penitentiary. Evelyn sat at her small wooden kitchen table, a cup of tea steaming beside her. She didn't tremble as she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, covered in Arthur's sharp, arrogant cursive. "Evelyn," it began, "I hope you are satisfied. The children are growing up without a father because of your vanity. You think you've won, but look at you. You're a clerk. You're nothing without the Vance name. My lawyers tell me the appeal is moving forward. When I get out, I will make sure the world knows what kind of mother you really are. You were always the weak link, Evelyn. You were a subject that failed the test." She read the words twice. 6 months ago, this letter would have paralyzed her. It would have sent her spiraling into the nerves, wondering if he was right, if she was indeed nothing without the gilded cage he had built for her. But Evelyn Vance wasn't that woman anymore. She looked around her apartment. She saw David's drawings pinned to the wall. She saw the stack of manuscripts she had corrected for the local press. She saw her own face in the darkened window, thinner perhaps, but with eyes that were clear and steady. She didn't burn the letter. She did something better. She sat down at her typewriter. She didn't write back to Arthur. She began to write the first page of a story. Not a ghost story, not a mystery, but a testimony. She wrote about the little yellow pills, the bank managers who laughed at wives, the hidden ledgers, and the silence of 1,000 identical streets. She wrote about the cost of perfection and the price of a woman's soul in 1956. She titled it, "The Echo of a Silent House." As the sun set over the snow-covered mountains, the sound of the keys clicking became a steady, rhythmic beat, the heartbeat of a new era. Evelyn knew Arthur's appeal would likely fail, but even if it didn't, he could never touch her again. He had owned her body, her name, and her time, but he had never owned the echo. The project had indeed failed, but not because the subject was weak. It failed because the truth is a living thing, and no matter how much dirt you pile on top of it, it will always find a way to reach the light. Evelyn reached the end of the first chapter and pulled the paper from the carriage. The sound was sharp, like a starting pistol. She looked at her children, then out at the stars. The story was no longer untold, and the truth was finally hers to keep.